3 years ago this month, Rob Ford won the race for Toronto Mayor. Since then, his office has seen its fair share of controversies and scandals, from allegations of inappropriate behavior to inexplicably frog-marching members of his office staff out the door at City Hall. And we haven't even talked about his poisonous relations with the Toronto Star and the Globe and Mail yet. But Scarborough is getting its subway. Half the city's garbage collection has been privatized and the vehicle registration tax is gone. Joining us now for more on 3 years of Ford Nation, Karen Stintz, City Councillor in Ward 16, that's Eglinton Lawrence. She's also chair of the TTC, the Toronto Transit Commission. Paul Ainsley, City Councillor in Ward 43, that's Scarborough East. He's also chair of the Toronto Public Library Board. Marcus G., the Toronto columnist with the Globe and Mail, and John Lawrence, who is the City Hall columnist for Spacing Magazine. We want to remind all of you that you can be part of this discussion. Producer Meredith Martin and online editor Daniel Kitts are hosting a Twitter chat right now, so please join us using the hashtag AgendaTVO. And it's great to see all of you around the table. Thanks for coming in tonight. Well, we had a bit of a list there of some of the things that this first term of Rob Ford have included. We didn't mention the business about the football team, the use of city staff with the high school football team. We didn't mention yet the alleged grabbing of former mayoralty candidate Sarah Thompson's behind at a public event. We haven't mentioned the alleged video where the mayor is supposed to be smoking crack, the arrest of the mayor's occasional driver, Sandro Lee. Anyway, there's been a few other things as well on the list. And yet, and that's all this calendar year, I believe, and yet, thousands upon thousands of people showed up at a barbecue for Ford Fest, as he does every year. Thousands upon thousands. Explain. John.
Well, I think he's a curiosity. You know, there are always these photographs that show up of the mayor standing with some young person at some some outside event. And my theory is that people are intrigued by him. He's this very dominant figure in our city at the moment. Whether the fact that people show up at his barbecue or want to be photographed with him is an indication of support, I don't know. I think he's kind of he's this weird object in the middle of our life at the moment.
Marcus.
Yeah, I've got to differ with you there. I think he's more than a circus attraction. I was at both of those Ford Fests, and his true believers, they are hardcore. They love the guy. They love, first of all, his policies, kind of low taxes and so on. But they also love something about him. It's because he comes across as a regular guy. He's got this authenticity. He's a little loose around the edges. He says what he wants. He gets in trouble for saying what he wants.
He's not polished, is he?
He's not polished. And in an age when so many politicians are so programmed, so, you know, blow-dried, so careful not to say the wrong thing, the fact that he is a bit of a loose cannon is almost an attractive thing to people. So I think that authenticity really sells.
You two know him in a different way because you're colleagues with him on City Council, so let me get your take on how you explain all of these controversies, gaffes, scandals, and yet enduring popularity.
Well, I think the one thing that Rob has done is he has stayed true to his brand. And he has a brand, as you mentioned, as the cost-cutting little guy who is going to save the taxpayer. Now, the fact that he's not that person is irrelevant for people who that they see that brand in Rob Ford. And when they elected him, they knew that he drank. He had an issue with the ACC that people knew about. There was issues around drug use that they knew about. He was arrested in Florida. That was well known.
10 years ago.
10 years ago. So when they elected Rob Ford, they elected a man with foibles who was going to take care of their taxes. And he has been that same person for the last 3 years.
But you just said he's not entitled to that moniker of the tax fighter or the guy who ends the gravy train.
Well, no, he's not. Although he presents as the common man, like the reality is he can host a barbecue for 5,000 people and pay for it himself. Right? Like,
so that's not common.
It's not. No, I can't do that. Like, you know, Paul can't do that, right? Yeah. So he enjoys a special privilege that he's able to pay for his expenses, host these parties, have his own driver, right? Although because of his personal wealth, he's able to do all these things. He still appears very much as the common man, and because he has all these foibles, it makes him seem that much more authentic. And he's never deviated from his brand. Now, you know, I said once to the Toronto Star, you know, if he had taken a cab, right, to 650 Dixon or wherever it is, right, and expensed it.
This is the place where the so-called drug
it's not
stuff
as he
was
goes
happening.
there. If he had taken a cab and expensed it, well, then we would have heard the outcry, because that would have deviated. That would have been a deviation from his brand, right? But the fact that he went there and that he has friends and that are different than, you know, and gets himself into trouble that you and I might not get into, that's not new. And when people voted for him 3 years ago, they knew that that's what they were getting.
Paul, how do you explain it?
Well, going back to the last election, and I agree with Marcus and Karen, you know, my wife worked downtown at the time, and a lot of her people she worked with were voting for George Smitherman. And then out in my ward, people say, well, I'm voting for Rob Ford because he's going to stop the gravy, or, you know, he's going to hire more police officers. And I used to laugh. I'd say, well, you know, I worked on the budget committee for 4 years. I worked for a city councillor that was the chair of the budget committee. And if I thought we could get rid of all the waste in City Hall and solved our budget problems, I would have. But, you know, people always believe there's waste in government. And, you know, you look at crime, where crime was going down across the board in every category, but you still see the front page of a shooting or a stabbing. And they believe that we need more police, because it must be, because there's a murder on the front page of the paper. And Rob Ford just took that and put it all together. And his core supporters still believe that. I've seen a lot of people around the fringe are dropping off because they've seen his other issues that are now coming with that. But you could dig down to the core support, it's still stop the gravy, and we need more cops.
Karen.
And I think we can't underestimate how effective a communicator Rob is on his issues. He's simple. People understand him. In a noisy, busy world, everybody knows what Rob Ford stands for. And I could go to my children's school, and my children are in grade 2 and grade 4, and every single child in that school knows who the mayor is. It's Rob Ford.
Well, he hates your paper. He hates the Toronto Star even more. Oh, yeah. But apparently he's not a big fan of the Sun even these days, because we saw the other day Joe Warmington, who's not hostile to the mayor, I think it's fair to say. Apparently the mayor called him and just dropped the F-bomb over and over again, yelling at him about uncomplimentary coverage. How does he, I mean, if he's in trouble with the Sun, is he in trouble now?
Well, you got to think. I mean, it's not the first time he's been in trouble with the Sun. You know, he's gotten quite a bit of negative commentary from, you know, some from Sue-Ann Levy, some from Adrian Batra, his former press secretary, who's a columnist there, some from their editorial board. So, you know, it's totally friendly fire. And I'm amazed that he doesn't know, he doesn't have the common sense to think before he calls up and reams out a reporter, because I mean, I think Marcus would do this, I would do this, anyone would do this. You take notes and then you write it all down, and that's exactly what Warmington did, and now we're talking about it.
Is it indication, though, Marcus, that as much as there are people in this city who don't like the mayor, they may actually hate the media more, because the mayor has been able to take on two of the biggest voices in this town, Globe and the Star. So far, he seems to be winning the battles. What do you think?
Well, I don't know. The press council would disagree. The press council vindicated both the Globe and the Star in their coverage of the drug issues.
But he's still the mayor.
He is still the mayor, and he's still popular. But I mean, the fact that he's going after Joe Warmington, who's probably the most Ford-friendly columnist in town, I think indicates sort of really how this mayor tends to just lash out at anybody who criticizes him. And I don't think that's in the end a very attractive quality. I mean, here's Joe Warmington, who kind of mildly said, maybe you shouldn't have gone after this guy who had his head down on a desk and got his picture taken in a community center.
That's what this was all about.
Yeah, that's what this was all about. Maybe given your own issues about when you roll into work and so on, your other private issues, maybe you should cut him a little slack. This is a fairly mild criticism. Rob Ford phones him up. It's Sunday night. He's having Sunday dinner with his family. He screams at him. This is Warmington's words. Screams at him over the phone. So, not very attractive.
Is the mayor, I'm going to ask you, at the risk of, well, we'll go into the background in a second. Sure. Do you think this mayor's a bully?
I do. And one of the issues that I find with the mayor, and you know, Joe Warmington's a perfect example, and he's not very good at reaching out to people and asking for an opinion or advice. You know, perfect example for me was a year ago. We watched a football game in his mother's basement, and we had
you and the mayor.
Well, there was 20 of our councillors.
Okay.
We had a group of people, we got together for Sunday night football and, just hang out at the mother's house. And we spent 3 hours there talking about what he could do differently and, giving some advice. And, flash forward to last December, after he'd gone through all of his integrity commissioner complaints and everything else at that point. And his brother at one point said to me, Rob's learned a lot. And I said, well, tell me, you were in the house when we watched football and we all talked, gave him advice through 3 hours. Tell me one piece of advice that he's implemented from that, Sunday night gathering. Doug couldn't name one, right? And that's been continually throughout his term in office. And we saw that, before he was elected.
There's a fine line between being a bully and just demonstrating strong leadership. Which do you think he is?
It's hard for me to say he's a bully. He's never bullied me directly. In fact, I don't think I've ever had a conversation with the mayor.
What?
I usually have in a room with his brother or his advisors. I've never actually sat down and had the mayor and I have a talk one-on-one. So
you're the chair of the TTC.
So I can't say that he's bullied me. I mean, I can say that he flouts every rule that applies to the rest of us.
Like what? Like,
he talks about subway, 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 and yet had no idea how to deliver on that, and somehow made it a council standing in the way of his vision when we said, listen, let's just build what we can afford. So, and again, the integrity commissioner said you probably shouldn't use city letterhead to solicit funds from developers and lobbyists who do business with the city because there would be the appearance of favoritism.
This is for his football interest.
For his football interest.
Does it anyway.
And again, he did it anyway. And yet he continues to, like if I were out buying alcohol and beer for 1,200 of my closest friends at a city park without a permit, somebody would tell me that that's not the right thing to do, and they would be correct. But yet, Rob seems to be able to get away repeatedly with flouting all the rules that apply to the rest of us. And it's a phenomenon that I can't explain. But again, because he seems to be the common guy fighting against the institutions of City Hall, the media, the integrity commissioner, and he's fighting the fight on behalf of the little guy, he just gets away with it.
And you have kind of no explanation for how he does.
And I think it is quite remarkable. And I think it does speak to, again, what are the elements of the city that aren't working for the people that support Rob Ford? Because, again, he continues to just break every rule under the sun, and yet he still seems to find favor with a population.
Well, maybe it's because he's had, Marcus, some political successes over his 3 years. For instance, what would you put at the top of the list of achievements?
Well, there's been a few things. He ended the car tax, which was unpopular. He privatized garbage in part of the city. He has saved some money on the budget. That's true. And now there's this subway decision, which though it owes more to Karen Stintz than him, he will claim credit for at the next election. So he's got a fairly solid platform. He's been campaigning for mayor for re-election from the day he was elected. And his slogan of stop the gravy train, cut taxes, and so on, he will repeat over and over until he's blue in the face.
I want to follow up with John on that. He came to office pledging to fight the gravy train, quote unquote, at City Hall. Was there a gravy train, and did he stop it?
Well, I think it's a false premise. I mean, there's always, there are always ways of doing things more efficiently. I mean, during the first couple of budget cycles, council went after all of these phantoms, couldn't really find them. And there's a lot of hypocrisy that I see. The decision around the subway is a great example, right? He backed this decision. Metrolinx has admitted, Metrolinx is the Regional Transportation Authority, that they've spent $85 million on a project that now is not going to go ahead with his full endorsement. Now, $85 million is a huge amount of money.
Whose money is that?
That's our money.
That's City of Toronto money.
It's not City of Toronto money. It's the provincial government that invested in the City of Toronto. Okay. So it's taxpayers' money, and it's a very large sum of money. But I think that a lot of ordinary people don't know what $85 million looks like. But then you stand up and you complain about $74,000 in chairs, and it's like, oh yeah, that's my mortgage or some portion of it. So I get that. So I think there's a lot of hypocrisy.
The chair thing was when there were some new chairs that apparently were purchased or reupholstered or something like that?
Something like, yeah. And
for the councillors in their lounge.
And
he hit the roof.
Okay. And there's lots of that.
Paul, I'm glad you're here because I do want to talk about the latest goings on with you. You and Rob Ford were on the same page once upon a time.
Yes.
You were on his executive committee, I think.
Yes. Yep.
And then you voted against the subway to Scarborough, and which we'll get into in a second. And he didn't like that. And he decided to initiate, I think with his brother's assistance, the councillor Doug Ford, I guess they call it a robocall campaign in your ward against you.
Yes.
His voice, the mayor's voice, on the phone calls, these automated phone calls, telling people how you let down the side. What did you think of that?
Well, I was very mad, beyond mad. You know, the number of people, you know, and earlier in the day, both brothers had wished me, you know, this was on the Friday of Thanksgiving, and both brothers had wished me, you know, happy Thanksgiving to all your family, and, you know, the last conversation was at 5 o'clock. An hour later, my residents were all being robocalled. And based on a vote earlier in the week that we had on public transit, my vote certainly was not any pot shot at Rob Ford. I simply looked at LRTs versus subways, and I looked at what I saw with the increase in costs that I think should have been more carefully outlined. And as I was turning the page in the report, the cash register was ringing, and I certainly, being what I think is a fiscally responsible city councillor, was not prepared to go back to my residents and say, this is what I voted for. I didn't think it was, you know, a good proposal, and I simply voted no.
And he's just telling people that.
Well, he, you know, on our Friday evening, using his office phone number, to me, you know, we have a 4-year election term. It should be about governance. Campaign, if you want to robocall me out of your campaign office and tell me, my residents, how I voted, go right ahead. But to use your City Hall office, I took great exception with that. I've had a lot of support for that. A former, David Warner, a former Speaker of the Ontario Legislature, wrote a letter and said completely inappropriate. So I don't think I'm off the mark when I stand up and say, you know, enough.
Was that a bridge too far for the mayor robocalling?
To me, it was just politics. I mean, Mayor Ford has been clear from the beginning that he's running for an election, as I say, from the day he was elected. And he's constantly sloganeering. He's done robocalls against other people, Karen among them, before. Yeah, I think it's a legitimate technique. All you're doing is sending somebody a recorded message saying, I disagree with what this councillor did. If you don't like the message, you can hang up, or you could say that's nonsense and I like what the councillor said. I think it's part of the to and fro of politics.
So is there an implied threat in the call that because you didn't vote the way I wanted you to vote, we're going to be looking for you next time?
It totally is, but I think that's fair game. What you're saying is you are not doing what we think you should be doing for your constituents. We will try to defeat you at the next election. We will try to persuade people to vote against you. That's just part of politics.
You were robocalled?
I've been robocalled. I've been
what?
called everything under the sun by the brothers. They've used their radio show. They've said terrible things, and I've just taken the approach that I don't share their viewpoint. And you know, at one point, Doug went after me because I went to see the Blue Jays play the Yankees in New York, right? On a Friday night when I was in New York. And he just took offense at that and suggested I should give back the tickets. I'm like, to who? Right? I bought the tickets. Like, who would I would give the tickets back to? So, I mean, they can get a little extreme, and it's just all part of the brothers. And so I think, and we spoke about this, the reason he robocalled was out of vindictiveness, which is an attribute I don't think a mayor should have.
Meaning you didn't vote his way on something,
exactly.
So
and
he punished you.
And so now I'm going to lash out at your residents. But in terms of the actual calls, you know, it's Rob, and there's nothing that, again, is unique about that kind of behavior.
But I think you're challenging this. You're taking this to some institution. Am I right about this?
So I
you
also
filed a complaint.
Well, I filed a complaint. So we have an integrity commissioner. So I'm filing a complaint. We have a councillor's code of conduct.
And you think he's violated it?
And I think he's violated. And I also filed a complaint with the Canadian Broadcast Standards Council about his radio show because, you know, I'm a big believer of free speech, but I think he's violated a number of their tenets in their code as well.
Let's talk about the subway, because this is, you talk about a story that just repeats and repeats and repeats, and we thought we had a subway plan or an LRT plan, a transit plan in place years and years ago, and then it's had many different incarnations. We got a graphic of this we can bring up right now, and let's see if we can figure this all out. Okay, there's some of Toronto, Northeast End, and we had an LRT plan once upon a time, and then we had Glenn Murray's plan, who's the Minister, I guess, Transportation for the province of Ontario, and then we had a final plan. There's blue, that's Murray's, and then there's the original, right? And now we have a final plan, which I gather passed council 24-20. It's a pretty close vote, not too long ago. Karen Stintz, start us off on this. This is you're the chairman of the TTC. What has been finally passed? Is that the best plan, do you think?
I believe it is the best plan.
Because?
Because it will extend the Bloor Danforth line to Shepherd. It will make Kennedy Station a seamless transfer for people. We have 14,000 people in the peak that will be using that line, which is at the low end of a subway. It will mean that Scarborough actually, there's 3 stations in Scarborough, if you can imagine. So there's, of the 69 stations across the city, 3 are in Scarborough right now.
This is for, Scarborough's got like 600,000 people or something, right?
Exactly.
So, okay.
And so it brings a subway network up into that corner of Scarborough, up to Shepherd. And I think it was important to connect it to Shepherd because now it will connect to the LRT line and actually bring a network into that region, into that section of Scarborough, which is very important.
So you're satisfied at the end of the day?
And there's one other component that I think that gets overlooked quite frequently, is that the SRT can continue operating while the current Scarborough Rapid Transit. Okay. It can remain in operation while that subway is being built, which is huge. Because when we think about what happened in the flood, when Kipling was down and we had to shuttle people for half a day, and the chaos that it caused, and not having to do that in Scarborough, and being able to keep that SRT in service while that subway is constructed, I think is a huge benefit for that area.
John, is this the best plan?
No, I think it was a ridiculous decision. I mean, Council signed an agreement with the provincial government's agency, Metrolinx, not quite a year ago, to spend $8.4 billion on 4 LRT lines. And I'm not sure, with the governments at all levels under huge fiscal pressures, why we went looking for an excuse to spend another $1.5 billion.
Because the political imperative was, got to build a subway to Scarborough.
I know, but I mean, it's money that belongs to taxpayers, right? And we should use it in the most efficient way and get the biggest bang for our buck. So what's $1.5 billion? I did the little calculation.
It's a gas plant and a half.
Well, it's 5 ACCs. Okay, it's equivalent to the average income of 32,000 Canadians. So it's a lot of money. And this project is going to take a lot longer than the previous LRT. The LRT had the full approvals in place. I'm not really sure why we did this, except for politics.
Marcus G. went out there. I read your column. You said, you know what, people? I've been to Scarborough. It's pretty busy. It's pretty congested. They need a subway.
Yeah, I think it's a little odd that transit advocates like John are complaining about this, because if you look at it, there's some really good things happening here. First of all, we have all 3 levels of government, federal, provincial, and municipal, contributing to this. Secondly, we've got Rob Ford, who has always said he's against revenue tools to support transit, in the end, reluctantly coming around to a small tax increase to fund transit.
Say that again. The Mayor of Toronto, who for years has forsworn any tax increase at all, is now on the record as saying, okay, I admit it, we need one.
That's right. And his last subway plan fell apart precisely because he didn't have a scheme. He refused to pay for it. And now finally he's on board. That's good news for this line. But it's also good news for the future, because we have Kathleen Wynne at the provincial level who's talking about revenue tools to spread transit even more broadly. So now we've got, if she can say, look, even Mayor Ford is for revenue tools, that's not a bad thing.
You, Paul, if I can put it this way, somewhat courageously voted against this thing, because every politician in Scarborough voted in favor of it, and yet you voted against it.
Yes.
What did you, I mean, you told us a little bit before about what you saw. But why aren't you worried about the political consequences of voting against something that every other elected person in Scarborough is for?
Well, as I said, I think I'm very fiscally conservative. I looked at it 2 ways, Stephen. I looked at an LRT fully financed by the province with 7 stops that went up to Shepherd that was going to connect with the Shepherd LRT. Or on the flip side, you can look at a subway that on paper has $910 million of taxpayer commitments to it and a whole raft of costs on top of that, from construction costs overrun that the city has to bear, $30 to $40 million in capital maintenance costs that the city has to bear annually for the life of that subway, where that was all covered with an LRT. And then I looked at the opportunity costs of things that we could have built, like repair the Gardner Expressway, libraries, community centers. To me, it was just fiscally irresponsible to vote for it. I think that you know, and then I get robocalled by the mayor because I think, you know, I've caught the mayor, where the mayor is supposed to be there for the taxpayers of the city of Toronto. When these costs start coming forward and you see what you're going to have to pay out of the taxpayer pockets, I think a lot of people are going to be shocked and surprised.
You didn't see it that way?
I didn't, no.
How come?
I saw it as an investment in transit. And to the points that Marcus raised, we had 3 levels of government coming to the table and saying we want to invest in the subway infrastructure. And it had been, up until that point, very easy for every level of government to campaign on subways. Tim Hudak was campaigning on subways, Glenn Murray was campaigning on subways, Mitzi Hunter was campaigning on subways.
You weren't though, once upon a time.
No, my position was always that I like subways, let's build them if we can afford them. And in this case, we had a plan, it was funded, we had all the levels of government coming together, we had Scarborough commuters. And, you know, and again, you can talk about the voters, but the voters are also commuters that are relying on the service and the system to get them from A to B in the most timely way that they can, saying that yes, we want this investment. And even my neighbors at Yonge and Lawrence, I have the benefit. I have 3 subway stops in my ward, and I know what that means for my community. And so now to be able to bring that to an area of the city that doesn't have that same kind of service, I thought was an excellent investment to make.
Okay, let's get this on the table. Mayoralty politics is caught up in all of this, right? You can't run for mayor in this city unless you get a lot of votes from the inner suburbs. Scarborough is one of them. So you can't run for mayor unless you got Scarborough, and you're not going to get Scarborough if you don't go for a subway. Is that part of your calculation?
Well, I don't think that, I mean, I think that across the city people care about transit. And you don't have to live in Scarborough to care about getting around the city in a more effective way. And no matter where you live in the city, you need an affordable place to live. And so those are the things that I think are going to unite Torontonians. And I would not want to go into the next election and see the same divide between the downtown core and the suburbs that we saw out of the last election. I think if we actually are going to be one city and achieve our post-amalgamation goals, we need to look at ourselves as one city and have a campaign that speaks to the whole city.
But there is some politics here, surely.
Go ahead.
You'll acknowledge. I mean, what we were going to see here was Rob Ford was going to run for re-election, and he was going to say, you, Karen Stintz, killed the subway to Scarborough. That was his original plan, to build a Shepherd subway to Scarborough. I think it doesn't hurt, Karen Stintz, if I can, with respect, that you now came around to supporting this subway, and I think it's a sensible one. But so now we have both Karen and the mayor claiming responsibility for this subway victory. The mayor was very quick to jump on board and say, look, I got what I wanted, a subway. He had almost nothing to do with this, zero, with this new plan to change the LRT to subway. Karen deserves more of the credit on that, but it's definitely a political game.
What's not going to happen that might have happened because a lot more money is going to go into this one subway line as opposed to other things?
Well, I think that, I mean, what happens is that the city is now on the hook for, you know, $910 million.
Minimal.
And, minimal, yes. And so, you know, I mean, the city council has to figure out what it can't do. But I think that I think it makes it more difficult to ask people for more money. And this is what the provincial government is trying to figure out how to do. How do we fund transit across the entire GTA? And so, you know, when Kathleen Wynne finally gets her act together and says, okay, well, these are what the revenue tools that we're going to use to fund transit across the GTA, a lot of Toronto voters are going to say, hey, I'm already paying for extra now. I'm going to pay an extra $40 a year, you know, until I'm dead. So I'm already giving, so I'm not really in support of that. That's one thing. The second thing is I think that, you know, the mayor had instantly signaled that he was going to take on the other 2 LRT projects. And so Toronto has sort of become the land of unintended consequences, where you know, we have these LRT projects that are being picked off one at a time, that were fully funded, that were agreed to by 2 levels of government. And I don't really understand why we went there.
Karen.
Just quickly, I find it remarkable that there is such a heated debate about the Scarborough subway. Because we certainly didn't have that kind of heated debate when we talked about extending the Yonge University Spadina line into Vaughan Metropolitan Centre. And there's...
Well, but that took 30 years to happen.
And so we should be thankful that this one only took 3. Like, we're on the right track. Now, I mean, and when we think about the ridership, there's exponentially more ridership on the Bloor-Danforth line up to Shepherd than there will be to York University and even into Vaughan Corporate Region. And the city is contributing the same amount of money to that line, and yet we didn't have any of the poisonous debates over that we had over Scarborough.
So what made this poisonous?
And that's, I think, a question of reflection that we have to consider, and that it was, yes, we did have a signed master agreement, and we also had a request from the province to reconsider it. And so it is an acknowledgement that, yes, subways are valuable in city building. They are not the only thing we build in transit, but we need to understand they do have a place. And that it's not an LRT versus subway debate, it's a building the transit network that is the most important aspect. And just finally, if we're going to ask people to pay for transit, we need to build what they value.
And they value subways.
And they value subways. And they don't make sense everywhere, but where they make sense and where they're good investments, they should be made.
John?
Well, the province only asked for this reconsideration because City Council voted to change its mind, right? I mean, there's been a lot of mind changing going on over the past year. I mean, this group endorsed the LRT plan and a year ago with the master agreement. Then they all voted, except for 2 councillors, to oppose the use of property taxes to pay for transit. I mean, they did it in May. And then, 3 months later, it's like, oh, we forgot about that.
Well, what changed?
Politics. I mean, it's all about politics, and it's about the mayoral politics for next year. So there's this enormous amount of policy inconsistency going on, and I think it leaves a lot of voters confused.
Okay, two more things then on this. Do we know that the plan that's on the table today is it?
No. Well, what I can tell you is that with 3 levels of government committing funding to a line, that line's getting built. And as soon as we can get those shovels in the ground for Shepherd and Finch, those lines are getting built. Because when we talk about contract renewal or contract cancellations, that's a much different issue. And we've learned, if anything, how expensive it is to cancel a contract. So in this case, we hadn't let out a contract. And so we've adjusted the plan. And I actually feel confident that we've wrestled this issue to the ground.
Except I said, is this it? And you said yes, and you're saying no.
No.
Why is this not it?
Well, because we have the city-approved subway, we have the province-approved or requested subway. We're still, last I heard, we were doing an environmental assessment for both of them.
This is on the Glen Murray plan?
Yes.
For 3 stations with that hard turn.
And one of
so that's still on the table?
I think it is. And one of the things I've learned from the province over the past 10-odd years is when the province wants something and they're paying the bill, much like the Vaughan subway, we went in looking for money for maintenance costs for our TTC, and Minister Sorbera at the time said, well, you're building a subway to Vaughan if you want our money from us. So I think when you have 2 subways on the table and the province is footing the bill for a large chunk of it, you pay the piper.
Marcus, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, remember that what you're not mentioning here is that Ottawa came in with $600 million.
660.
With a long list of conditions.
660. Well, but they came in for the project that's going up McCown Road, not the Glen Murray sub. So what are we going to do? We're going to leave that $600 million on the table and say, no, we're going to build a different subway? No, I think this subway is going to happen. Second of all, I don't buy what John is saying, and other people have said that this is the beginning, complete beginning of the end of LRT, just because we're building a 3-stop subway extension. No, the Eglinton Crosstown, which is by far the biggest of those LRT lines, is going ahead. The hole is being dug. Mm-hmm. The other 2, I think, are pretty solid, particularly if the Liberals get re-elected. So I don't think it's the end of the world for LRT just because this short subway is going ahead.
Minute and a half to go here, and I want to ask Karen Stintz this. Do you think this entire debate, where Council has changed its mind several times over the last several years, makes the city look stupid?
I think that it has been difficult to build consensus around a transit plan. And it's been very noisy and very public. And yes, if I could go back and wind the clock back, I think there are things we could have done differently. But the good news is that it has been noisy and public, and we have built the consensus. And because of that, I feel quite confident that the plans that are now in place are the plans that we will stick to, and the next election will be about moving forward.
Paul, do you worry that we've looked, not we, because actually we weren't there, you guys were there, that you guys look ridiculous in the process?
One of the biggest problems that I have, Stephen, is, when you look at all the transportation planning for the GTA and you look at Metrolinx, and now there's a blue ribbon panel at the province, I really think, if we're going to have a regional transportation plan and you look at gridlock and the costs they estimate out to 2025, I said we have to start taking the politicians out of the equation or this is just going to continue on, I think, for the next 15 years. And it's going to have a huge effect on our economy.
Well, this conversation, I'm afraid, can't continue for 15 years or even 15 seconds because we're out of time. Karen Stintz, the Toronto City Councillor, we thank you for being here. Paul Ainsley, the Toronto City Councillor, we thank you for being here. Marcus G. will continue to read you in the Globe and Mail, and John Lawrence will continue to read you in Spacing Magazine. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.